Okay, today is the day and we get the matchmaking video, so I am just going to jump right into this and give you my thoughts.
Hi Rivals, I'm Zuyong. We've heard your passionate feedback and ongoing discussions about matchmaking and ranking in Marvel Rivals. Your voices matter, and we want to give you a transparent look into how these systems work and what we are doing to improve them. Quick heads up, any numbers used are for illustrative purpose only, and the calculation process is also simplified for easier understanding and does not represent the full detailed formulas.
Long story short, matchmaking is complicated.
After every competitive match, your score is calculated based on two key components, base points and performance points, each weighted according to your current rank. The formula looks like this. This depends on match outcome, your current competitive score, average competitive score of the enemy team. First, the match result determines whether you gain or lose points. Win and you will gain points, lose and you will lose points. Second, the difference between your competitive score and the enemy team's average competitive score affects how many points you gain or lose. If a player's competitive score is lower than that of the enemy team, the system recognizes that the player is challenging a stronger opponent. In this case, a victory will grant an extra bonus to the base points, while a defeat will result in fewer points deductions.
Okay, so on this, one of my older videos that I had said that, what explains the plus or minus couple of points difference in the sort of older system was that if you, let's say you're a GM3 and you will go up against a GM1 player, you naturally are going to be rewarded more points because of the fact that you were going up against someone tougher and you still managed to win. Whereas if you're the GM1 and you beat that GM3, you're not going to get as many. So this is just like pretty standard.
The reverse applies when facing lower ranked teams. Examples: players' competitive score 3,500, enemy team's average 3,500, win plus 20 base points, lost minus 20 base points.
And that's kind of what I guess. Like 20 seems to be their baseline. And then there's other factors that come into play for like the extra point or two difference. If that's like you're a lower rank or a higher rank compared to the average. And I think performance-based SR then also gives you a few more points, like maybe like 2 or 3, depending on like how well that you do. And that performance-based SR, once again, is like, it's not a system I fully agree with, but I understand that basically if you do a bunch of damage and you get a bunch of final hits, generally speaking, you get more points for it, even though I think that's not necessarily the best way to calculate like a good performance.
Players' competitive score 3,500. Enemy team's average 3,700. Win plus 25 base points. Lost minus 15 base points. Players' competitive score 3,500. Enemy team's average 3,300. Win plus 15 base points. Lost minus 25 base points.
All of that seems pretty standard with like, basic matchmaking stuff. So that all of that doesn't really surprise me at all. The performance-based SR points here is what I'm actually sort of more interested in.
To reflect your individual performance tailored to your hero's role, performance points reflect how well you played during the match. Because heroes in Marvel Rivals have widely different powers and roles, we don't just tally up stats. Even if two players contribute equally to the outcome, their raw stats may look very different depending on which hero they played. Instead, to accurately evaluate your impact, we use several steps to calculate performance points. For each hero used in the match, we normalize match stats to a per 10-minute value and convert that into a single performance value. We compare that to the average performance value for that same hero at your rank, also per 10 minutes. That gives a hero-specific performance coefficient. The better you perform versus the average, the higher your coefficient. If you played multiple heroes, we time weight those to get your match coefficient. We then compare your performance coefficient to your team's average to determine your final performance points.
This is kind of what I assumed what was happening is it's taking essentially like the average stats of whatever hero you're playing at the time and compares them at the people playing at that rank, which totally checks out in terms of like how the game was feeling from my end. And then of course, it's weighted because of the fact that you can't just like have it be like, oh, per 10. You also have to take into consideration like, well, maybe the match was really short. Maybe, you know, your team overall was struggling. Like if your team is struggling overall, then that will also affect the fact that you were struggling overall. So you couldn't get the same sort of like average to the rank as well. So that, you know, makes sense as to like what we've all been seeing. Like all of this is not really like too much of a surprise. What I don't like about this system though is that a good performance is based off of stats, and in hero-based shooters, stats aren't what win games. Like your decision making is what wins games. And as you know, if you watch my streams, there's a lot of times where I specifically take the fight to the convoy, not necessarily even to, you know, win or get any kills. A lot of time it's literally I'm just taking the fight to the convoy to stall it out for longer. You know, when I'm playing Captain America, I stand on the convoy to literally pull, you know, 2 or 3 people directly to me. And my goal isn't even to kill anyone. It's literally just to pull 2 or 3 people to me while I also stop the convoy and give my team an advantage. So that right there is like one of those things where it's like, you can't really weight that. I mean, like, I know some people have said like, oh, well, there's like standing on the objective, but it doesn't seem from my play that objective time is weighed all that much. It seems like it definitely heavily weighs how much damage you do and how many final hits you get. And it doesn't seem to take into consideration also deaths. I wish that deaths were a negative multiplier to performance-based SR because of the fact that a lot of times the people who are ace on my team are also leading in deaths, and they are actually the one that is actually causing my team the most problem because of the fact that they die so frequently, leaving us in a 5v6. So even if they were to continue performance-based SR, I wish they added a negative multiplier to dying too many times.
Efficient to your team's average to determine your final performance points. Examples. A Diamond 1 player spends 4 minutes as Loki and 6 minutes as Invisible Woman in a 10-minute match. Let's break down the performance points calculation. First, the system converts their in-game stats to 10-minute averages and then convert them into performance value. Assuming Loki has a performance value of 1,200 and Invisible Woman has 1,000. Next, the system finds the average performance value for Diamond 1 players with those heroes, which we will assume Loki and Invisible Woman both are 1,000. We then calculate the performance coefficients. Loki's coefficient is 1.2, while Invisible Woman's is 1. This is then weighted by playtime. The overall coefficient works out to be 1.08. Finally, this player's coefficient is compared to the other 5 teammates. Let's say that they are 1, 1, 0.8, 0.8, and 1.15, resulting in an average of 0.97. This gives us the final adjusted performance coefficient of 1.11. Once both your base points and performance points are calculated, your final score is determined by weighting these 2 parts. The weights vary by rank. As you climb the ranks, the weighting of base points will gradually increase, while performance points weighting decreases. In lower ranks, performance points have a higher weight to help skilled players rise faster.
So that's exactly what I had guessed. The reason why that you can get a sort of negative win rate climbing a lot of times is because of the fact that if you are mechanically just better, a lot of times the system is trying to rush you through those ranks faster because it recognizes that you're not supposed to be there. Like any player who is, you know, like GM, Celestial, Attorney, whatever player, if they played in low elo games, they would be able to justifiably do things a lot faster and be a lot more efficient about what they're doing, and basically boost their stats, so that way the system recognizes like, hey, for the average of what players are generally doing at this rank, this person is far outperforming how much damage, kills, and everything else that they're doing, so we want to get you the heck out of here. And that totally makes sense. And it also makes sense that like the closer you get to, let's say, like Celestial, like once you're in Celestial, like each game is basically plus or minus 20 points. Like occasionally you might get 24 or something in there, but it's much more unlikely because of the fact that once you start to actually get to that rank, all of those like stats you had before in low elo, which were you were performing above average, once you get to the higher ranks, well, everybody's performing above average, so now it's just the new norm. So that makes sense as to the reason why you climb, and the higher you get, the less likely you are to see those massive gains.
Higher ranks shift weight towards base points for consistency. Example: a player wins a rank match, earning 20 base points and 30 performance points. If the player is in silver, with a base point weight of 0.4 and a performance point weight of 0.6, the final score gained is 26. If the player is in Celestial, with a base point weight of 0.7 and a performance point weight of 0.3, the final score gained is 23. Our players hail from all corners of the globe, each with different time zones and connection speeds. Balancing fast matchmaking with fair matches has always been our challenge and focus for ongoing improvement. In Marvel Rivals, players are matched based on server node selection, team composition, competitive score. Once matchmaking starts, the system looks for opponents on your chosen server or servers. As wait time increases, the system gradually expands the search to higher and lower ranks, helping you get into a match promptly.
Okay, so this is pretty standard. It tries to, most matchmaking systems is always going to try and get you into a game as fast as possible. So what it does is it says, here's the parameters on which I want you to search. And as the time increases, in order to make sure it gets you into a match faster, it starts to weaken up a bit on those like strict rules it has. It's just like, hey, try to find someone that's like something that's super close. And after a while, it's like, okay, it's been like a minute, maybe include people that are a little bit higher or lower the rank to try and get people into the rank faster. And as the time increases, it's gradually going to get more and more till eventually it expands far enough to find people that can fit into a game. And so the longer there is a queue time, the more likely it is you might have, a not quite as perfect matchmaking, but it's going to get you into the game faster, because getting you into a game that is necessarily not the best is sometimes still better than waiting, 10 minutes for a queue.
The expansion is kept to prevent unbalanced games. Once we have
But by that statement, the expansion being capped, it says that in order to make sure it stays and remains fair on their end, they won't expand past a certain point.
12 players within the acceptable rank range, the match is set. Teams are then arranged to minimize differences in average competitive scores.
This is probably the more interesting part of the entire clip.
Team matchmaking is based on team size. For fairness, a 6-player team will only face another 6-player team.
So if you have a group of 6, it's going to try and find you another group of 6 to go up against. The same as like if you're in a 3-stack, it's going to find you another 3-stack. If you're in a 3-stack and you've got a duo on your team and the solo, it's going to try and find you the same on the enemy team.
An exact match can take time when taking into account all the factors, like competitive scores, server selection, etc. Since launch, 5-player teams have been disabled to protect solos. For other team size, the system opens up to more combinations as wait time increases. The system opens up to more combinations as wait time increases. Take a 4-player team, for example. The first system tries to match with another 4-player team, but if none are promptly found, It will eventually expand to mixed teams like 4-1-1 versus 3-2-1. Longer ways.
There you go. So once again, like as the matchmaking goes longer, it'll eventually broaden out its restrictions and say like, okay, well, if 4-1-1 can't be found quickly enough, then let's just give them a 3-2-1, which is still better than waiting, 8 minutes or something for a game or whatever people will get frustrated by.
This means broader competitive score ranges. And reaching the upper limit of the range can result in a difference in scores between the two teams. From the matchmaking results, this would appear to be an unbalanced battle. However, tightening the rules would mean much longer waits and a bad experience. This is the core challenge, balancing matchmaking quality and speed. Team kills make this speed versus quality trade-off more noticeable. At higher ranks, there are fewer players and they are spread across different servers, so this happens more often. So, after careful review, starting in Season 3.5, we've temporarily restricted teams of 4 or 6 players from matchmaking at higher ranks, where their balanced matches are harder to find. Moving forward.
Okay, so that checks out. The reason why they restricted it to where you can't have 4 or 6 players in ranked is because of the fact that as everyone was complaining about matchmaking and how things were either stomp or be stomped, it was because of the fact that, well, when there's stacks on teams, it makes it very difficult to have quality matchmaking. So then what would you rather have? Would you rather have quality matchmaking, or would you rather be able to group with your friends, right? And this is the complicated part that we're into, which is just that I understand that people want both, but you can't have both. So if you had to pick one, which one would you pick? And you also have to understand that like some people are going to say, I want to play with my friends. I think that's more important than having perfect matchmaking. And other players are going to say, well, I would rather have better matchmaking than I would be able to play in a large group. And you can't make everyone happy. So at the end of the day, this is like the reality of development is this is what we're stuck with. And this is the problem that we have. There is no correct answer necessarily of like what to do. But I understand that for a lot of people who are probably wanting to, climb and grind and prove their skill, it can be very frustrating if in the matchmaking experience you're going up against like I say a stack of like 4 pro players or something on a team, and you've just got like the 4 stack on your team is just a group of your buddies, right? Like that can be a very frustrating one-sided stomp, and it doesn't feel like there's much that you can do. Whereas at least if it was just like a duo on each team, then it would feel like you'd have more control into the game, and feeling like you have control over your outcome is a very important thing when it comes to game design and game development, because if you don't feel like you have control and if you can blame the game, then you're not going to want to play the game. So I understand that, especially from like the matchmaking perspective, when they limited like, how many people you could play with, I immediately saw that as like, oh, they saw that people were complaining about the matchmaking and they wanted to, address it and try and improve it. But this is the cost of that request. And now the question is that to the players of like, is this what you want? Like, is better matchmaking better than grouping with your friends, or should we go back? And at that point, now it's up to us, the players, to tell them what we want, which of those two, we choose, because it's not an easy question to answer. And even I can't say for sure.
We will continue to explore new solutions to better meet the diverse needs of players. To help you better understand how the matchmaking system works, here's an example scenario. Suppose player A teams up with player B and player C to queue for competitive. In this scenario, player A is Diamond 1, player B is Diamond 3, player C is Platinum 1. The average rank of this 3-player team is around Diamond 3. They select only the Oregon server node for matchmaking. Since there aren't enough teams of the same size and rank in the queue on this node, the matchmaking system gradually expands the search range as time passes. After 5 minutes, the system finds 9 more players who meet the criteria. These 9 players include another 3-player team with an average rank of Platinum 1, a 2-player team with an average rank of Diamond 2, and 4 solo players: player D, Diamond 1, player E, Diamond 2, player F, Platinum 1, player G, Diamond 2. To ensure fairness, the system first places the two 3-person teams on opposite sides. Then, the remaining team compositions are Side A, 3-player team plus 2-player team plus 1 solo player. Side B, 3-player team plus 3 solo players. Now, the exact team split is determined by the solo players to make both sides' average ranks as close as possible. The fairest division is Side A, 3-player team, Diamond 3 average, plus 2-player team, Diamond 2 average, plus player F, Platinum 1. Side B, 3-player team, Platinum 1 average, plus player D, Diamond 1, plus player E, Diamond 2, plus player G, Diamond 2. In this scenario, there are still notable rank gaps within each side. For example, Side A's player F, Platinum 1, and Side B's player D, Diamond 1, each have a 2 to 3 division differences from their teammates. This means there can be internal team imbalances. Assume once the match begins, the role selections are as follows. Side A, the 3-player team picks a vanguard player A, duelist player B, and strategist player C. The 2-player team chooses a vanguard and a duelist, player F. A duelist may stick with his preferred role instead of filling the missing strategist slot. To balance the team, the duelist player B from the 3-player team fills as a strategist. Side B, the 3-player team picks a vanguard, duelist, and strategist. Player D picks an additional strategist, player E picks another vanguard, player G picks another duelist. We believe that this is a situation many players have encountered before. In this case, Side B has a strategic advantage, as all 6 players are playing their main roles. On Side A, a duelist mate is forced to fill as a strategist. And the lowest ranked player is also playing duelist, which may weaken the team's synergy.
So the way that matchmaking works is it's just averages. It's just trying to figure out what your rank is and average you out. And then what makes your team or what makes your ability to climb easier is how flexible you can be and how good you are at the different roles, which is something that like I've always sort of like noticed and even recommended, is that the way that I started actually feeling like I was having fewer and fewer sort of like lost streaks was that my hero pool expanded to fit more needs. Once when I started, I was playing basically a, Psylocke only almost most of the time. And then after Psylocke, I also picked up, I had Magneto and Rocket sort of like as backup picks. But then when I decided to learn Captain America, I learned how powerful he was at controlling convoy maps. And then suddenly, as time went on, I had fewer and fewer lost streaks because now on convoy maps on tank, I didn't have to play Magneto anymore. I could play Captain America and do really well. Same for on support. I picked up Cloak and Dagger. I picked up Luna. On DPS, I also picked up Namor and Magic. The more my hero pool expanded and the more, willing I was to adapt to the situation, to the different teams I would come in, I would start to play into, the more I was able to win more games. Because as the matchmaking is trying to take the averages of everyone, like it can look at the averages of everyone. But once again, if you are if the best player on the team ends up having to fill to a role that's really needed at the time, it can be very difficult, right? But this is also the reason why the teams that end up switching are the ones that end up winning a lot more, because of the fact that they're adapting to their current situation, their current problem. And it's the reason why like one tricking can sometimes be so detrimental, because if your one trick isn't working out and the team is adapting not just to your hero, but also to your strategy, it puts the team with the one trick at a huge disadvantage. But the problem is that one trick still deserves to play the game. They still want to get this person into the game. But it's very difficult to find a perfect answer or solution to all of these different scenarios that could pop up. So yeah, like if you really want to be able to climb in this game, if you really want to be able to do better, as the game is going to try and put you into these different roles into these different teams in order to fill, the best thing that you can do is be willing to adapt either by strategy or by hero pick. And expanding your hero pool, especially because the more heroes you have under your belt, the more you can switch off with people. There's a lot of games I've played where players are legitimately struggling, and I just simply ask them, I'm like, hey, do you want to switch? Like, I can play, because a lot of times, like, I don't mind feeling. I actually enjoy playing all the different roles. I like playing tank. I like playing duelist. I like playing strategist. And even though I'm a DPS main, like I still have times where I like to play, Rocket. I played Rocket all day yesterday. I had a blast. I have days where I just want to play tank, and when I get into these different games and I see that there's a duelist specifically struggling, I'm like, hey man, like I can switch with you if you want. And if that player is easily enough is willing to adapt to a different role and take on a different role, then we can switch and I can pick up the slack where they were struggling before. This is the reason why, like, the more you're willing to adapt, the more you expand, like, your sort of hero pool, your toolkit that you can use, the more you're going to win games naturally in this sort of like in the, the hero shooter genre.
Recently, we have received a lot of feedback from the community, with many players believing that our matchmaking system employs EOMM, engagement optimized matchmaking. This would imply manipulating the matchmaking queue to keep players' win rates around 50%, ensuring they remain engaged in the game. We want to be clear, Marvel Rivals does not use EOMM.
I really hope that now we can finally like stop this sort of nonsense because of the fact there's nothing keeping you at your rank. There is no sort of like, what I really dislike about the EOMM arguments has been sort of like because of the fact that no one really understands it and really understands like what's going on behind the scenes. It's very easy to just make stuff up and just force you to believe that like, oh, I got on my rank up game and of course I would end up getting like the Jeff player that would end up throwing my game. It's like, yeah, that happens. But that Jeff player was finding a game that happens to be at the same time. And you just happen to be really unlucky that you got a Jeff player who ulted into every mag ult, right? But also at the same time, I played last night with, a couple of my buddies and he got into a Celestial game. He got to his rank up and we won. But people don't look at the rank up games that they win and be like, oh, there was engagement based matchmaking that I overcame. It was literally just like that. It's like completely out of mind. There are sometimes you get to your rank up games and you just win. And sometimes when you get to your rank up games and you lose, but you take more notice of it because it's your rank up game. It's so important to you. It becomes like any other factor that goes into it, the stress on top of it. You're like, oh, this was rigged. But like this matchmaking doesn't feel any different than any of the other like competitive shooters I've played, or it doesn't feel any different than Overwatch. Like Overwatch, there people would complain about loss streaks all the time, but there was no talk of EOMM. It was just like, oh, I can't believe like, I lost like 10 in a row. Like, sometimes that happens. Sometimes you have bad days. Sometimes you have good days. That's just how luck works.
So, why do some matches feel uneven? Why do certain players encounter win or loss streaks? We would like to take this opportunity to provide some insights, hoping to clarify some of the confusion for everyone. In a competitive two-sided game, the fewer players on each side, the more accurately the competitive score reflects individual skill. However, as team size increases, this accuracy drops, since even if both teams have identical average scores, other factors like teamwork and coordination can sway the outcome. Additionally, because we don't lock roles, players might end up playing a role they are less comfortable with, which means they may not perform at their rank's full potential.
So this goes back to what I was saying before, which is that the more different roles that you understand, the more different ways you're willing to adapt, the more you're able to perform better than other players at your same rank, right? Like if you are say a duelist and a duelist only, and that's all you've ever played, then you don't understand what the perspective is of a strategist player or a tank player. And a tank player who, doesn't play strategist or duelist, they're not going to understand how to play around the different kits on, that everyone else has on their team. So they're only playing their own game. But the person who's willing to adapt and the willing to be able to fit into any role and perform better, that doesn't have to fill, it doesn't have to worry about filling for a team. Like, that player is going to perform better and climb faster than the players who only specialize in one thing and one thing only. And here's the thing, even if you are, say, like a duelist only player, you're going to extremely limit yourself in terms of like your potential by not mastering the other roles to a certain point to be able to even just understand what those roles go through, right? The reason why, like, I'm a DPS main, I say I'm not a DPS, one trick. I am a DPS main, but because of the fact that I also know what it's like to play strategist, and because I know what it's like to play tank, I play DPS differently than most insta-lock DPS. I peel for my supports, I help apply pressure for my tanks, and I know and I understand to do this because of the fact that I understand what it's like to be in those positions. Even though supports are really, really strong in this game, a lot of times there's so much damage happening all at once, they don't really get a break to even, try. They don't get a break from healing to even do damage a lot of times because there's so much damage coming in. But when an Iron Fist jumps on the back line, they have to be forced to defend themselves. So even if that Iron Fist doesn't necessarily get kills, they have to stop healing their team. Me as a DPS, because I understand that strategist perspective, I am going to, and I see an Iron Fist on the team, I'm like, oh, I'm going to do nothing but peel this Iron Fist off of my backline all game. So that way they have the room to breathe and be able to perform and do their job. The players who, so even if you put me on the same team as another player who at the same rank, my ability to adapt and understand like how to work with my team is going to give me an advantage over that person on the enemy team who only knows how to play Iron Fist or only knows how to play Spider-Man or only knows how to play that one character and that one role, right? So the more you're willing to understand each role, the more you're willing to adapt, the more you're willing to coordinate with your team, the better you're going to do. This is also the reason why, like I tell people, like, even if you get upset or frustrated with your teammates, don't tilt at them. The more you tilt at them, the more they're going to get tilted and the less clearly you're going to think. And there's been lots of times that I'm sure people have seen me on stream where my team is super toxic and I mute them, and I mute them as soon as I can, because as soon as they're not giving me any valid information over comms anymore, I mute them so that way I can think clearly, right? I understand that when you're listening, when you're trying to focus on the game and you have someone yelling in your ear and complaining about something that happened like 5 minutes ago, it's not helping, right? So as soon as I mute them and I just focus on what I need to do, I start to play better, right? So a lot of times players who are actually like tilting at their team are not just, they're actually ruining the chances of them winning that game. So the more you're willing to adapt, the more you're willing to work with your team and ask them like, hey, you're struggling, like, can I help with something? Like, is there something I can do? And the supports might say like, hey, we need someone to peel for us more. Or, hey, can someone switch with me? I'm not doing so well this game. Like, the more players are willing to adapt, the more you're going to win your games. It's just that simple. Like, it's a team-based game and it's about working together.
Even if you are assigned your preferred role, playing a hero you are less skilled with can also affect your impact in the match. So, why don't we add role queue?
Queue times.
First, we believe that allowing players the freedom to play as their favorite superheroes and team up with others to create diverse creative team combos encourages more varied strategies and gameplay.
I would agree with this as well, because of the fact that, there's a lot of times people default to thinking still that triple support is the way to go, and triple support is not my favorite comp at all. It just doesn't really work. It doesn't hold space well. It doesn't secure kills. Triple support worked back in the day when I like earlier seasons, because of the fact that support ults were so short and so easy to charge that it made sense, but it doesn't make sense now. But like, at least now you have the freedom to be able to say like, hey, you know what? I think I might get more value if I switch to stretch. I think I might get more value if I go to tank. And as someone who plays all of the different roles, I like having the option to suddenly say like, you know what? Like, I know I was playing Psylocke on offense on Yggdrasil or Yggdrasil Path or whatever, like, or Hall of Dejaya. Like, now on defense, I'm gonna run triple tank. I'm gonna go cap, right? Having that freedom to come up with these different compositions it allows you more creative expression, and player choice is so important in game design that once you start to limit that choice, the games get a lot less fun. It suddenly feels like you're locked into, instead of feeling like you had freedom before, now it feels like you're extremely restricted, and that to me is a bad part of like game design. You don't want a player, you want the player to feel like they have choice.
Second, adding role-based matchmaking would significantly increase queue times,
There it is.
while still failing to fully eliminate skill discrepancies between matches.
So even if hypothetically you had role queue and everybody got the role that they wanted, there would still be skill discrepancies. And at the same time, like, you're going to have people who have, let's say you have someone on the team that is a duelist player, right? And that duelist player is a Spider-Man one trick. But then you go up, that Spider-Man one trick gets matched against a person on the enemy team who is a Hulk and a Namor. They have a Hulk and a Namor one trick each, right? So now you have the Gamma team up against someone who's playing Spidey who can't switch, and the Namor who can't switch, and the Hulk that doesn't switch. The Namor and the Hulk player naturally have an advantage. But then hypothetically, let's say there is no role queue and you have a Spidey one trick and there's a Hulk and Namor on the enemy team. Now all of a sudden, at the very least, the Spidey has the option to switch with somebody else and say, hey, I'm not locked into DPS, right? Like, I can switch with the support or I can switch with the tank because of the fact that they have a Hulk Namor and I'm not doing well. Like, sorry, I said one trick, but I should have just said like Spidey main and a Hulk and a Namor main. So then that Spidey main is like, hey, yeah, they're just naturally having a team up that is like hard countering me. I can play a different role, but Spidey's the only good DPS I can play. So, and someone on the tank roster can be like, oh, well, I play Punisher. So we can just, I play Punisher, I play Hela, I play Phoenix, whatever. I can switch with you. That doesn't lock you into this situation where, role queue would say like, oh, we had to stick you with something. So this is just what you got. So yeah, having the freedom to be able to switch with your teammates, I think is really good. After, I understand why Overwatch did it back in the day, but I don't really want them to go the ways of role queue for rivals. I like the fact that I get to play whatever I want.
Where there are choices, there will be differences. Objectively, it's quite challenging to have an equal number of players across the three roles. To strike a balance between matchmaking speed and fairness, the competitive score ranges for each role would have to differ. Roles with fewer players would have lower competitive score thresholds, while roles with more players would require higher thresholds. This, in turn, will lead to greater variance in match quality. We are working to introduce more interesting vanguards and strategies in future updates to give players more choices. But these changes will take time to develop. We thank you for your patience.
So long, the TLDR of what he just said there is that, when they announced the game and they released the game, they had this is all the stuff that they had made, and making a hero, designing a hero, testing a hero, building a hero, like doing the art, animations, and effects for a hero. That's a lot of work, and this isn't including skins and stuff on top of that. Like, I know that players are going to look at like, oh, well, they were adding a player a month for like all of this time. Like, wasn't it super easy for them? No, it wasn't. A lot of that stuff took a really long time in advance. And so they released the game with a certain number of heroes, but they have a lot of heroes already that were either already in the works or already done and waiting that they could release over time. So that way we all had content to play off of. And I'm sure that they were releasing more stuff early on to keep the hype level on the game high and keep us playing for more, keep us playing for longer. So, when you're looking at sort of like, a character like Blade or something like that, and you see like, oh, well, we got Blade, and like just last month we had Phoenix or whatever. Like, you can't create a character like that in a month. You can't create characters like this in 3 months. It takes significantly longer. And what they're saying there is like, hey, we hear that you want more vanguards and strategists, but we have the stuff that we already have in the works is already in the works. Like, it's either we have that stuff or we get no new content at all. So they're going to start prioritizing vanguards and strategists, but we might not see the effects of that for another like 6 months, 8 months, a year. But that's just the way it is. So, it's for anybody who was hoping that you might get a bunch of more vanguards and strategists immediately. Like, sorry, but now that they've heard the feedback, they're going to take it into consideration. But unfortunately, it's not going to happen very quickly.
Statistically, win and loss streaks are a matter of probability. For example, if two sides are truly 50-50, over 3 games, the chance of 3 consecutive wins or losses is 12.5%. Over 10 games, the chance of 3 or more wins or losses in a row rises to 50%. So, over enough games, everyone will eventually experience win or loss streaks. For those interested, you can use tools to calculate the probability of achieving a streak, whether it's 5 consecutive wins or 5 consecutive losses, under different win rate scenarios over 10 matches. Of course, the game isn't pure math. Several in-game factors can increase the likelihood and impact of streaks, making these experiences feel more pronounced. For example, team average scores are rarely perfectly balanced, so actually win rates may not be exactly 50%. When queuing consecutively, you may face some of the same players in back-to-back games, which can carry over the outcome chance from previous matches.
Basically, when you go up against a tough team, I highly recommend that if you struggled against certain players, right, like maybe a certain stack or something, before queuing back up again, look at the recently players played with and check that tab and look at the people who you struggled against and wait until you see them go into queue and wait until you see them go into game. Once you see they're in game, then queue up so you get a fresh new batch of players. But if you queue up right away, of course you're going to see similar people at your same rank on your same servers. That's matchmaking, right? They just got you out of a game with players, and now it's going to put you back into a game probably with very similar players until it finds other players who it can pull you in, or until there's until it starts to separate you two, and then find other players to match you with. So if there are people where you're queuing, especially like someone like me who queues really late at night, a lot of times there's not as many people awake. So what I do is a lot of times is I wait for certain people to go into game. Either also because of the fact that like maybe some DPS mains are queuing up at the same time. I wait until they get into game and I just try a fresh new batch of players. So yeah, there's a lot of other factors here, but statistically speaking, a win and a loss streak is not improbable, but there's a lot of factors that go into, winning a game, and basically like you still have control over your outcome in these games, whether you want to believe it or not. Sure, there are some games that are for sure cannot be won, but there's a lot of games that can be turned around. And I think it's just a matter of changing your mentality of sitting there and instead of giving up early, asking yourself like, okay, what can I do to turn this game around? Because hero-based shooters by nature are very snowbally. Like it's very easy. The whole point of them is to try and control that objective through momentum. And you do so by staggering your enemies. You do so by building, ult economy advantage. Like there's all of these things that factor into making the game feel very snowbally. And everybody's had those games where you were crushing the enemy team and then suddenly they flipped it and they started crushing you and you ended up losing the game. What started as like a stomp and felt like you were going to win suddenly flipped it around on you, because that's just the very nature of this genre.
This is even more common in team matchmaking, where the pool of available combinations is smaller, especially during off-peak hours or in less populated regions.
Yeah, so if you're picking your server in a less populated area, or you have fewer servers that you're willing to go into, for instance, like if you are on the West Coast and your friend is on the East Coast and you both settle on saying like, okay, we're just going to play on the Dallas server, there's fewer players it can pull from in order to try and find a matchmaking experience. The more servers you're able to play on, the more players that it'll be able to match you with, giving you a better experience. And the more you play during like the regular peak hours when people are playing, the more likely you are to get more players and a better matchmaking experience. So if you want a better matchmaking experience, try to expand your server size or play during like the common hours in which more people would be playing. Don't play at like 4 a.m. like I do.
Even if the probability of a streak occurring is just 1%, Marvel Rivals' large player base means many will experience that.
Yeah. So if a win or a loss streak is, only 1%, but there are 70,000 people playing, then 1% of 70,000 is still a lot. I don't know, 700? I don't know. There's still a lot of people, whatever. I'm bad at math. There's still a lot of people who are going to experience that, even though the probability is low, it's not zero. And the thing is about like those sort of like things where people are like, oh, it is highly improbable that this would happen. It's like it's highly unlikely that it would happen. But what would be a miracle would be if it didn't happen at all, right? If something has a 1% chance of happening, then eventually, if you do it enough, if you do something enough, eventually someone is going to be that 1%. So just because of the fact that it's unlikely doesn't mean the fact that it's impossible. So when I see the players who are like, why did this happen to me? Sorry, but you were the 1% that day. I apologize, but that's just how it works.
We are constantly analyzing feedback and refining our systems. Your trust and input help us shape a better experience. Thank you for being part of the Marvel Rivals community. We are excited to keep improving with you.
And that's that. Honestly, it sounds exactly like how I expected it to be. I disagree with sort of like, how the performance-based SR sort of like works, but also at the same point, like once I climb high enough towards the rank that towards the higher ranks where I'm used to playing at, it affects it less, so it's not as big of a deal. But overall, it's your standard matchmaking system. It tries to find people in similar rank and places you together. And what sucks is that sometimes you as a duelist player get matched into a game with other duelist players who refuse to switch. And that really, really sucks for you. But it's also why like your ability to adapt and your willingness to adapt increases your odds of winning, right? Like if you can play multiple roles and play multiple roles really well, that will just increase your odds of winning the game. If you're willing to adapt with your teammates and work with your teammates to find a solution to the many different problems that the game can present you with, the more likely you are to win the games that you're playing. A lot of times, I've experienced personally where I've been playing games, we get absolutely stomped in the very first round of like a domination game, and they're like, okay, what are we gonna do? Because I remember one game on domination, we all went out. I went at Magic. We had another person that went Black Panther. And we went up against a Thing, a Penny, and a More. Like it was the most anti-dive comp ever. And we just entirely lost the first point. Every one of us switched and we won the next 2 points with ease. Our willingness to adapt is what made it so that way we could win. And the higher that you climb, the more players recognize like what they did wrong and what they can do to improve and what they can adapt to, and more willing to sort of accept responsibility for like their mistakes. There's a lot of people who still, of course, pass the blame onto their supports or their tank or whatever else. There's still those people. They still exist at all ranks. But the higher you climb, the less likely you are to see that, because the more people are able to see the reasons actually why they failed, why something wasn't working. And that's the reason why like a lot of my videos exist. And the reason why I put them out there was because of the fact that as someone who has experience in the game industry and in game design and game art, I understand that the problem is that players just don't know. They don't understand what they could have done better. And my videos are always trying to help you understand what you could do better. So that way it's a less frustrating experience for you, because hero shooters as a whole are super fun, but they do a really bad job of explaining actually how to win these games or what went wrong or how to improve upon it. So that's the reason why like my videos are so focused on trying to just improve your quality of experience. So that way, as you climb through the ranks, you understand that when you lost a game, you understand why you lost collectively as a team. But there's also, the factor of the fact that it is a team game. There's going to be times that you play perfectly. You have one of the best games of your life that you absolutely pop off like crazy and you still lose, right? And just the same as that'll happen, you're going to have games sometime where you are struggling to do anything. You are absolutely flailing around like a fish out of water, and you end up winning still because your team ended up carrying. That just happens sometimes, right? And that's not a bad thing. That's just how team games work. But the more you're willing to adapt, the more you're willing to work as your team, work with your team rather than blame or fight against them, the more you're going to be able to find a solution of what you need to do in order to win. The more games you're going to win. Uh, so yeah, this is why I am just always encouraging you to, if not, you don't have to change your hero. Sometimes you just need to change your strategy. If you're struggling, you can always like ask someone else to switch with you. I'm trying to do my best to help show you guys not just sort of like, how to carry games, but also just not how to throw games. Because all of these things are like, there's so many factors in a hero shooter that could change the outcome of the game, that it's not as simple as just saying like, oh, well, this is all you need to do in order to win. And I think that sort of like, the complicated nature of the game is also what makes it very frustrating, because you don't always know. It's not always obvious what you could have done differently. But, there are things you can do in order to increase your chances of winning games. And realistically, like if you have like a 55 or a 60% win rate in these games, you're doing really well. But you need to understand that a 55% win rate is still only like 11 out of 20 games, right? If you play 20 games and you win 11, that's pretty good. You're still positive, right? And that might feel really frustrating, but that's part of the process of improving, is that you're not going to win every single game along the way. And instead of trying to think of it as like only focusing on like the wins are all that matter, you need to focus on just improving. The more you focus on just trying to improve and play better and see where you did what you did wrong and try and do better the next game, the more you're going to improve. Because there are games that I've played that I've lost that have been fun, and there's games that I've won that weren't fun. I want to make the experience of losing fun more than I want to make the experience of winning fun. Because winning is usually fun in general. But yeah. So yeah, basically Rivals works like every other matchmaking system out there. It's just, I think it's just a misunderstanding of how hero shooters work, which is they're very snowbally. That's just sort of the way the system is. That's sort of the way that the genre is. But I'm not surprised by any of this information. I think it's a cool little video. And I hope that this satisfies the players that are out there. Cause to me, it's good enough for sure. I'm still having a lot of fun with Rivals. I had a blast last night just playing Rocket all night and took a break from like playing Psylocke or Cap. Like I still have a lot of fun playing this game, and I hope other people do too. But I hope now we can get away from the discussion of finding excuses as to why, players aren't doing well. Because at the end of the day, like if you are good enough, you will eventually climb. And just the same as, like I win or lose games, like the, Tap 13, best Psylocke player in the world, like he still loses games occasionally too. And he's an absolute beast on Psylocke, right? Like you can't win them all, but, just focus on trying to improve. Focus on having fun, and it makes the experience more enjoyable. But yeah, no EOMM, standard matchmaking finds players at your rank and puts you up against them. Sometimes if the matchmaking goes on longer, you go up against tougher opponents. But if you win, you get to climb higher. And if you are better than them and you believe that you're better than your rank, then you'll be able to beat those people. But yeah, standard matchmaking. Hopefully everyone's happy now. But yeah, that's my thoughts.